how do you promote something to investors when all that's going for society living is co-living in an extremely glamorous way? For anybody that doesn't know, I do recommend you go to the Greybrook website and have a look at that, because it's absolutely fabulous what they've got going. But how do you sell that to somebody in whose mind is the only thing that's going on in their mind is today, COVID, right? I can't use any of that. So in that context, right, how do you deal with people's deepest, most concerns when you're trying to sell a product like real estate?
Sure. So as an investor, I think, again, when we're investing in something that we're buying today, usually in the context of society, we're leasing it up in 3 years. You got to first get all your permits and entitlements, and then you got to build it, and then you got to start leasing it. So anything that we transact on today or since the pandemic started, your window to sort of when you start building and looking at leasing is a few years out. So you have to, again, take a long-term perspective. And notwithstanding, it's hard to look through the fog at what's happening today and all of the unfortunate circumstances surrounding the pandemic. If you believe that the world will never, ever, ever be the same, then, we're having a different discussion. If you believe that at some point in time, there will be some version of normal life, which I believe to be the case, whether it's fully normal or some slightly modified version of normal, all of the trends that existed that brought people into cities, that made cities expensive to live in, that the rental demographic and who those people are, assuming that sort of comes back to some level that was a pre-pandemic level, generally people can wrap their heads around it. So anything that we invest in today, people understand the context of the macro thesis, and they believe that, okay, in a few years, there's a pretty good chance that many of the trends we saw heading into the pandemic will be similar to the trends that we see 3 years from now. I buy that. I think it's a great investment for that reason. So to address it from an investment perspective, that's how we have to look at it. As it relates to what's happening on the ground with some of our projects that we've already invested in years ago that are now at the point where they're leasing up or people are living in them, it's been actually quite interesting, because to sit here today and say that a co-living platform would be unaffected by the pandemic would be insane. Everything's affected by the pandemic to some degree. The question is, how do you manage that, and what are the drivers and decision points for people? And I think that one thing that we try to do is to try to create as safe an environment as we can, with the right protocols, with the right sanitation, protocols and things like that. So we create as safe an environment as can be. But then also there's a reality when it comes to urban living, and that is price point. I always say that when I joke around and I say the sitcom Friends was really just adults who are living in an expensive city rooming together. That's what co-living is. All we've done is automate it and make it a lot easier from the perspective of the tenant. So what happens in the pandemic era is that people who live in cities that are prohibitively expensive, a co-living solution allows them to access an urban setting at a much cheaper price point. And in some cases, they weigh okay, it's a pretty safe environment. I've got to live with roommates anyway if I want to live in the city. So this is as good a situation as anything, because it's professionally managed. It has the right protocols, as opposed to me, relying on myself and my roommates to be doing everything. So in fact, we've been able to overcome that on the basis of preparedness, as well as on the basis of being able to deliver what I think is a fantastic urban living experience and social experience within a price point that is a lot more attractive than what would otherwise be available. So that's really the way we've dealt with COVID. And frankly, we have a lot of evidence in our portfolio, whether things are leasing up and they're in lease up, or whether they're existing stabilized assets. And we've seen a lot of stability, which goes back to the macro thesis of residential, real estate and its resilience, because at the end of the day, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People need a roof over their head, whether they're living as an owner, whether they're living as a renter, they do need a place to live.